On our children, this works. The pain and suffering of boo-boos wondrously disappear with a compassionate hug or kiss, a special Band-Aid, and you're okay. Suffering and compassion live in a clear duality. The first is resolved by the second. But all of life is not that simple. There are some hurts which no amount of hugs or words of comfort can resolve. And there seems to be an undercurrent of suffering in our world which we cannot seem to love, charitably give, or will away. I used to believe until recently in that way that we believe in things that we really know aren't true, that compassion conquers all. Like a giant game of rock, paper, scissors, compassion on top of suffering wins. During my years living in New York, I would see people living everywhere on the street, begging on every corner, and I would speak to anyone who asked for money and muster my compassion to wage war against their suffering. I could feel the pain ease just for that moment, and naively, perhaps even selfishly, and humanly, I did not think about what happened to them in the next moment once I was gone. Somehow, I miraculously believed that my compassion was the yin to their suffering yang, and the flip side of the same coin. And unified dyad and all things in the world exist in one category or the other. If we all could just be compassionate enough, it would overtake the suffering and this would all go away. And yet the next day, there it was again. More pain, more hurting. What were we doing wrong? During this past summer, my best friend from college, who has been on the other end of the phone through so much of the last 18 years of my life, valiantly fought and ultimately lost a very cruel battle with ovarian cancer on September 4th. As she became sicker and sicker over the months, my beliefs in compassion as a cure for suffering were completely torn away. One particular night, I took the overnight shift with her and truly learned the limits of compassion in the face of pain. I knew it would be a long, rough night. I thought I knew what to expect, but nothing could have prepared me for the experience. Sleeping, waking, vomiting, hanging bags of meds on an IV pole, nurses in and out, sleeping, waking, being sick again, rocking, moaning, machinery beeping, more meds, sleeping, waking, more sickness. There was a rhythm to it. Progressively, the episodes of wakefulness turned into more violent acts of a body turning on itself. And as the evening wore on, the ritual picked up its pace and its intensity. Finally, she was just whimpering. I didn't know what to do. She no longer wanted to be touched or comforted. She no longer wanted songs sung or even a hand to hold. And I knew I threw everything I had at this suffering monster. And each round of compassion just bounced off of it, leaving it unsaved. She just desperately wanted the nausea to stop, and it wanted it to stop coming over and over again, and there was nothing that I could do about it. Eventually, I stopped sleeping even when she did, and I just sat at the end of the bed watching. Brief moments, some just seconds at a time, where she was free from the hell of being awake. Our sages taught never to wake the condemned from dreaming, even when their dreams are nightmares. While nightmares may be horrible, they are a horror from which you can awake, unlike the waking life of the damned, from which there is no escape. When morning came and it was finally over, I could neither sleep nor stay awake. Impotent, disturbed, exhausted, I lay in bed for hours, agonizing, just swirling unanchored as part of my faith completely fell away. How could such suffering happen? What should we do to make it end? Now, I'm certainly not the first Jew to struggle with suffering and how to respond to it. Over the ages, our teachers and sages have had many ideas, and let me share with you just a few. God is just, and people do not therefore suffer. Any suffering that might occur is simply resolved by offering sacrifices at the temple, and those who did suffer simply didn't understand God's divine plan. If you're suffering, it's just because you're confused. Suffering is a result from the evil inclination, or Yitzhar Hara. When appropriately channeled, it inspires us to be creative, and it's ultimately a gift from God. When misdirected, however, evil will result, and when good people suffer, they will be rewarded in the world to come. People suffer because of past selective transgressions, and there's nothing to do to get out of it. Our intellectual selves, both then and now, resist accepting being powerless to pain, and yet that is part of our history. Another option, one can choose to suffer for Kedushat Hashem, or in the name of God. Another one, suffering is an affliction of love, Yisurim shel Ahava. It is the ultimate form of divine love which results in unio mystica, true unity with God. And so while we can do nothing to kiss it and make it better, at least we know there is some greater divine plan and greater good. These last two ideas coming out of a time in our Jewish history where our suffering knew no end. Punishment is for sin. There will be no reward, not in this world, not in the world to come, and any suffering you endure is a result of your own sinning. And the last two, suffering is not important, so ignore it. And suffering is not real, so just change your state of mind. They're all on our books. Basically, after thousands of years of trying to work that out, we know that suffering exists. We know we can't stop it, and we know we don't like it. All of us. Look around this room. Who here has not known pain? Past poet laureate Mary Oliver writes, "Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine." This line is so stunning because it assumes we all know despair, because we do. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, the 19th century founder of contemporary orthodoxy, wrote, "It is the note of suffering which, like a voice from heaven, penetrates the heart, requiring, above everything else, to feel ourselves connected to all other beings. Hurting is universal, and the experience ultimately unites us. It is part of how each of us enters the world, crying, because none of us wants to leave the warmth and safety and comfort of the womb, the rechem, the Hebrew word for womb. It shares the same root as the Hebrew word for rachamim, compassion. So just as our existence begins with suffering, it is born from a place called compassion. In fact, the two are so intrinsically woven together that the Zohar states outright that compassion needs suffering in order to exist. Consider it for a moment. Throughout history, throughout our lives, there is pain and there is suffering. Suffering doesn't exist so that compassion can happen, but since it exists, compassion is an organic and essential result. In this way, they complete one another. Rabbi Hirsch defines compassion as the pain of one being awakening the pain in another. And he warns, do not suppress this compassion. It rouses the love which reminds us that we belong to the sufferer and their sufferings, just as they belong to us and our painful places. And while we experience pain and suffering, compassion says, you are not alone. As Jews, we have a unique relationship with compassion. The Talmudic rabbis considered it to be one of the three distinguishing marks of Jews, along with modesty and benevolence. As Rashi taught, do unto your neighbor, don't do unto, wait, it's behind me. Do unto your neighbor as you would do unto yourself. The rest is commentaries. Go forth and study. If someone is cruel and does not show compassion, there are sufficient grounds to doubt his lineage as a Jew. And according to Maimonides, the 13th century philosopher and theologian, the cultivation of compassion is one of Judaism's central ethical objectives. It is a manifestation of being made in the likeness of God, and it's the very culmination of our spiritual life. See, one of the most intimate ways we know God is through God's compassion. A Talmudic term frequently used in legal documents for God is rachamana, it's an Aramaic word, the compassionate one, denoting that our law, the Torah, is God's compassionate gift to Israel, to us. Torah teaches that we are created b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God, and we are commanded to walk in God's ways. The rabbis interpret this to suggest that compassion is the highest form of imitatio Dei, the imitation of God, and living out being created in His divine source is our mission in life. The 20th century scholar of the Musar movement, Chofetz Chaim, further adds, anyone who asks of themselves, why should I do good for others, and refrains from exercising the virtue of compassion, removes themselves completely from the sacred. By not caring about anyone else, you cannot connect with God. Compassion can bring us closer to the source of all being. Now, the one who has known pure joy, if only for a moment, Simone Weil, French philosopher and Christian mystic, explains, this person is the one for whom suffering at the loss of that joy is devastating, and yet, for that person, there is no punishment. It is God holding their hand and pressing rather hard. For the one who has experienced joy will discover buried deep under the sound of their lamentations, their lamentations of loss, the pearl of silence that is God. Suffering can bring us closer to the eternal as well. Karen Armstrong notes that in every single major world faith, compassion is not only the test of any true religiosity, it is also what will bring us into the presence of what Jews, Christians, and Muslims call God or the divine. Why? Because in compassion, when we feel with the other, we dethrone ourselves from the center of our world and put another person there. And once we get rid of ego, then we are ready to encounter the sacred. What's true is that they are the place where suffering and compassion meet. And at this place, we find something deep and something powerful. It is the place where we are kissed and made better by the sacred. These sufferings exist, and we can't change that. It's one of those basic truths of life, just like point, line, and plane are basic truths of geometry. Suffering is an inescapable experience of living. We spent ages trying to work our way around that, but today we have learned to stop asking how to end suffering. And on this Rosh Hashanah, we ask a new question, which the book When Bad Things Happen to Good People by author Harold Kushner, it begs us to ask, who knows why we suffer? What matters is what are you going to do with it? Yes, compassion does not stop suffering. Yet being compassionate in the face of suffering, we must be. And we can only be compassionate by getting ourselves out of the way and putting someone else at the center of our world, and also making space for God. The either-or model of suffering or compassion is insufficient because it misses the sacred, and that, after all, is the point. So what do we do with suffering is we bring compassion to it, and we transform it into something holy. And through that process, the compassionate and the sufferer are transformed as well. Compassion can transform all of us. For me, my capacity to love has been expanded exponentially after my summer in New York with my friend, Tammy. My friend gave me that gift, and in losing her, I found a life renewed and reborn. Rachamim, compassion, reta, the womb. That rebirth is open to all of us. Tammy. The last time I saw her, she was beautiful. The angels are around you, I said. Tammy had a radiance about her, and yet death felt so close at hand. Don't worry, she said. You did a good job. I feel really blessed. I wanted to blurt out, I don't care if you feel blessed. I want you to feel ready. But thankfully, I did not. I got my ego out of the way. I did not know what she meant, but I knew it was something big. And so I tucked her words away, which I couldn't understand until actually writing this sermon that I'm sharing with you now. So thank you. Over the months of visits with Tammy, it was my job to sing her to sleep at night. We had a repertoire, which began with Ashki Venu, the prayer for God to watch over us when we sleep, and then the Misha Bera, the prayer for healing. Tammy's not Jewish. She had no idea what I was saying, but it didn't matter. On my last visit, I knew I'd never see her again. And it happened to be the last day that she was conscious. I sat with her and massaged her limbs and shoulders. "Sing," she said softly. And so I did. Hashki Venu, and then Misha Bera, and then a song that had been on my mind. Well, well, the water is wide. I can't cross over, and neither I have wings to fly. Give me a boat that will carry two, and boats shall row, my love and I. I liked that one, she said. Me too, I said. Want it again, I asked. Yes. And so I did. And now I think about that song. I see two people in conversation, and the first one says, "The water is wide and I can't cross over, the suffering is vast. I cannot do this on my own." And the second replies, "And neither I have wings to fly. I can't take you out of this as much as I wish I could." And the second turns to the boatsman and says, "Give me a boat that will carry us two, and we'll row together. You're not alone in this, and I am with you, and we can get through this together and come out on the other side transformed." I threw all the compassion I could at Tammy's suffering, which was vast and endless, and I couldn't change her pain, and that destroyed me. But I came to learn that I could carry her away from some of the agony even for a moment. As I rubbed her shoulders that day, her head resting against me, she slept a deep sleep for a few minutes, and being there with her, the divine presence was with us. As she said, "I feel blessed," and I did too. And even though I'm a rabbi, I did not bless her. We brought blessing to one another, and through it, we were both transformed. Us sufferers. We sit in this room, all of us, together, and rooms like it around the world today. All of us living lives with pain, and all of us capable of living lives of compassion, lives transformed, and lives full of sacred messiness. Today, the year of 5773 is written, but repentance, prayer, and justice will temper God's decree. As we embark on the days leading to Yom Kippur, when our faith is sealed, we ask, will we listen deep under the sound of our own lamentations and hear the pearl of silence that is God? Will we heed the call of the godliness within us to ever more compassionate living? In this year ahead, I pray we recognize our pain in the lives of each other, that we climb aboard that boat together, never leaving another as a stranger, and transform suffering through compassion into sacred lives of divine humanity. Amen.